Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, as I said to everyone, and welcome to members of the public here this afternoon. Staff, councillors, nice to see you all here, and I hope you've all had a lovely Christmas break and New Year. The weather is now starting to play its part, which is great. Do I have any apologies this afternoon? I have two. Councillor Truman and Councillor Park are in Wellington, Emergency Management conference. Councillor Cousins for lateness. He's just on his way from the Harbour Master. I think that's all. If I could have a mover, please. Apologies. Moved by Councillor Hickling, seconded by Councillor Stewart. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? Carried. Okay. We go to item number 1 has been withdrawn. There's no item number 1 in your agendas. Been withdrawn for today. Item number 2. Taupo Mobility Action Reference Group. Nice to see you, Colin and Ted, Mr. Jones and Mr. Coburn. Nice to have you in the chamber and your fellow members out there as well. Lovely to see you, and the floor is yours. Thanks, Colin.
Oh, thank you, Mayor David. Councillors, thanks for letting us speak to you today about the work of the Taupo Mobility Access Reference Group. For obvious reasons, I'll refer to the group by its initials, TMARG, from now on. And I was wondering, before you received your business papers for today, just how many of you were aware of this group and what we did. Could I have a show of hands from councillors? Okay, that's good. Thanks for that indication of your level of awareness, and hopefully over the next 20 minutes you'll learn a lot more about us. I'll start by running through the terms of reference that I think you've got in your business papers there, and then lead on to our history to date. And Ted Jones will finish our presentation with details on where to from here. The terms of reference were written in June 2005. They state that the purpose of TMARG is to build the Council's understanding of the needs of people with disabilities and how these can best be addressed in order for the Council to meet its obligation to support the New Zealand Disability Strategy vision of a fully inclusive society. And I think you've also got a copy of the 15 key objectives of the disability strategy in front of you too. So the role of TMARG is to provide feedback and advice on the Council's service delivery, policy development, draft policies, design and planning. TMARG's intended to be a first point of contact between the Council and people with disabilities. The group's not intended to remove or reduce the Council's responsibilities to obtain further input from other sources of expertise, and Ted's going to speak on one such source next. Members of TMARG are also expected to provide new initiatives to be considered for inclusion in Council's long-term community plan and annual plan. We're also available to provide submissions on other Council plans and policies. Membership is expected to be representative of the broad spectrum of issues for people with disabilities in relation to Council activities. For example, our membership at the moment represents the Royal New Zealand Foundation of the Blind, Aged Concern, Town Centre Taupo, Taupo Parents Centre, the Lakeland Disability Trust, Somerset Retirement Village and Grey Power, while mobility scooter users, those who use wheelchairs and also drive, are also represented. And nowadays I attend the meeting in my capacity as a member of the Lakes DHB Disability Support Advisory Committee. So we are quite a broad representative group as intended. The group may also set up subgroups to progress particular issues of interest, and recent such groups were formed to advise on the redevelopment of Hugh Street and the AC Baths. Our membership should include up to 12 members and 2 councillors. With the recent resignation, however, of Councillor Keith Crate and ex-Mayoress Lynn Cooper no longer representing the council, the 2 councillor positions on our committee are now vacant. So please give your participation some thought, as our group needs 2 of you to step forward to provide good council representation, feedback and guidance. Further to membership, we don't stick strictly to number, as it's more important that the group has an appropriate make-up rather than the number of members being strictly limited. And the criteria for membership includes the experience of living with a disability or an awareness of the needs and issues affecting people with disabilities. Members should also represent the broad interests of those experiencing disabilities and not limit their views to one specific organisation. And of course they should also have a commitment to the vision of the Taupo District as a fully inclusive community. TMAG currently meets at 6 weekly intervals from 10:30 a.m. to 12 noon on Wednesday mornings, and our next meeting set for 12th of March. Members of the Council's Community Support and Services Division service TMAG meetings, and the current contact is neighbourhood broker Rose Prisk, who does a wonderful job of keeping our secretarial and admin work up to date. The first TMAG meeting was held on 6th of July 2005, and the initial meetings concentrated on the most used areas of the Central Business District area, and a list of issues to prioritise was compiled by August 2005, and many of those first problems are now fixed. As the reference group developed, the community support team involved other divisions of council. So now we have regularly roading, paving, building control, compliance, engineering and special project managers attending our meetings to inform and gain feedback from us. That brings me to some of the special projects we've done over the years, and featured here is the mobility access brochure. This was developed as a TMAG initiative in conjunction with the Taupo District Council. The objective of the brochure was to inform community members and visitors of accessible facilities such as banks, ATMs, accommodation, dining, parking, public toilets, respite care and medical facilities. It was quite an ambitious project. The brochure includes the brochure includes assessments and ratings of the facilities listed. The Lakeland Disability Support Trust funded the brochure and local radio network stations promoted it, and at the time of its release in 2011 it was available from District Council offices and sites in Taupo, Turangi and Mangakino, as well as from the respite care facilities and accommodation houses listed. Other success stories over the years include the Hugh Street upgrade. You can see by the pictures on the slides there that the pedestrian crossings are very disability friendly, and there are yellow tactile tiles arranged in strips across the road for guiding the blind across the street. The decorative fence features keep the pedestrians in the designated crossing areas, and the integrated seating units are a welcome feature for those who need somewhere to rest when they're doing their chores in town, during the upgrade, we also advised on mobility car park sites and access into shop entrances. In recent years, a number of new mobility car park spaces have been installed, including those near the Taupo Library and the Great Lakes Centre, and along Ruapehu Street, Huhu Street and Tamamutu Street, and also at the Acacia Bay shops. In response to issues raised at T-Marg, mobility scooter parking was provided on the footpath in Oramatangi Street. A Where Can I Park brochure has been developed. This information can now be found on the council website on a new parking page featuring a map which will be fully interactive once it's fully developed. It's a work in progress at the moment. I've had a bit of a play with it. It's quite fun, actually. You can pre-plan your parking when you go to town when it's fully running. We've been involved in the AC Baths upgrade and are pleased to report that now people with age or weight-related disabilities can access the two 25-metre pools for exercise via the shallow angled removable stairways they've put in there. There's also a ramp into the leisure pool for wheelchair users and changing rooms for the disabled. Now, one of my favourite subjects here, new and reconstructed pedestrian curb crossings are now meeting their standard practices. This prescribes a smooth, shallow transition angle through the water drainage gutter, and it's also pleasing to observe that these curbs seem to be a standard issue in all the new subdivisions around the district now. However, the curb crossing work is nowhere near finished. There's a lot more needs doing. We receive complaints from visitors and locals alike about old, uneven, steep and dangerous curb crossings at every T-Marg meeting. Even in the central business district, that's probably where most of the complaints come from. There's still many such crossings around town. And all who use them have welcomed the long overdue installation of the pedestrian refuge islands, which feature the tactile pavers for the visually impaired and safety handrails, and there's been installed in busy streets around the CBD and of course on Lake Terrace. Accessible pedestrian links through the parks and reserves and along the lakefront enhance our beautiful district too. These photos show the Tongariro South Domain, the link between there and the Great Lakes Centre across Story Place. The main paving through Riverside Park, and the new paving by the eyesight in Turangi. However, there's one little brickbat. After such good progress after the past few years, it's disappointing to stumble across the rough and muddy gaps in the new 5 Mile Bay walkway. Those make it difficult for everyone to negotiate this pathway, and I'm sure the Purvis family who donated the money are probably very disappointed about this development. So, why should you support T-Marg? You may be sitting there wondering why we should spend money on providing easy access to everything in the community. Well, according to the most recent Statistics New Zealand Disability Survey, 1 in 5 New Zealanders are disabled, and these stats don't include people who find themselves temporarily disabled, such as mothers-to-be, parents with small children and prams, those recovering from injury accidents, surgery or temporary medical conditions. Mobility disability is the most common type of disability, It's especially common in older New Zealanders. An estimated 29% of people aged between 65 and 74 and 51% of people aged 75 and over have a mobility disability. And as we're aiming to become an age-friendly city, easy access around our town for the elderly is an important part of earning this title. Any one of you here today could have a car accident or become paralysed or brain injured. You could have a stroke. You could lose your sight or hearing. The good news is you would cope, because as humans we're infinitely adaptable if we are well supported. The key is support. It's physical barriers and poor attitudes that actually disable people. So before I hand over to Ted, I'd just like to add that we must not just stop at improving the paving that I've talked about quite a bit. To become a fully inclusive community, as envisaged by the New Zealand Disability Strategy, all public buildings and spaces in our town must be accessible. It also includes privately owned buildings intended for public use, such as shops, offices, places of entertainment, refreshment and accommodation. To help achieve this, I submit that TMARG should be consulted in the planning stages of all new projects before plans are signed off. This includes all commercial projects. So I'll leave you with that and hand the presentation over to my colleague Ted Jones.
Cheers, Colin.
You have just about covered the field, I think. I'm Edward Jones. I'm a paraplegic in the last 5 years, courtesy of our wonderful Park BMX bike track. Anybody can do it. It's easy. This reference group is evidence that the TDC has been keen to support the local disabled population. But the big surprise for me has been the statistics that came out of the last census that 17%, as Collins has said, of the people in New Zealand are disabled in some way. It is huge. It is a large hidden group of our population. You just don't see it. You don't see that percentage on the streets. No way in the world. But it represents a social and commercial opportunity for all towns, and Taupo should probably grasp it. So the Mobility Reference Group is asking the council to do two things: promote accessibility, that word which I actually don't like using. It doesn't describe things to me in detail to the person who's not thinking about accessibility. Promote accessibility for all as a desirable social and economic opportunity rather than a mandatory obligation. Basically, society treats the accommodating of disabled people as an obligation. Underneath that, there's a large community of the most poorly paid people in New Zealand who are supporting the disaffected at home. We don't see them. And number two is we'd like you to immediately employ an outside auditor to conduct an accessibility audit of Taupo and ultimately of all TDC urban infrastructure, so as to gain a measure of current shortcomings, if any. Other towns have started to do this. There are a couple of companies in New Zealand who've set up to do the audits. We strongly, I don't know if the word beg, but we strongly request that you find room in the budgets to commission an audit of the town's infrastructure as a point of reference. Otherwise, you're totally dependent upon groups such as I, who really, individually, only know the areas in which we commonly frequent. So we need foreign eyes to come and view the town. We believe that tourists, in other words, people from out of town, ambulatory or not, support a substantial part of our local economy and should not arrive here with any concerns about physical access to anything. When we, the disabled, move about the country, we have to inquire in advance as to whether we can be accommodated. Do I have access? Those findings influence our decision as to where we visit and what we do and what we spend when we get there. We're talking about 1 in 5. We'd like Taupo to be known by that 17% as the easiest place in the country to visit. There will be varying opinions on this. Some would say, why on earth want a whole lot of disabled people here? The last thing we want. So there'll be varying opinions. But in a more domestic sense, a lot of our problems are under our feet. Let's call in detail. Friendly infrastructure planning demands the use of paving materials that are friendly to the wheels of trams, wheelchairs, and frail pedestrians. No unramped doorways or cheap deteriorating cobblestone, please. Every misaligned cobblestone is a threat to the visually impaired or the infirm. As you feel every joint on the road under your wheels of your car, so the wheelchair user feels every cobblestone under the wheels of his or her chair. Great on bad pain days, I can assure you. Taupo slopes to the river or to the lake. So therefore, there are no naturally flat areas at all. Believe me, level concrete or tiled surfaces are magic, pure magic. With the chair. But there are only so many times that you can visit Pack and say, or might attend, twirl around their floor without actually buying something. A countrywide ageing demographic will encourage more big box development. The nation is getting older. People want to go indoors. Not good news for downtown. Because roofs over flat floors will become even more desirable. And town planners should note this, I believe. Presumably the TDC applies universal building code accessibility standards to planning approvals, but the status quo will not satisfy future needs. A change in thinking that anticipates the changing demographic will be required. Taupo, like any other town, has an opportunity to move early and gain a national reputation as a town with infrastructural and environmental friendliness. Just to conclude, consider this. Should a fire be detected in this building, here and now, power to the small elevator, single elevator, would probably automatically be disconnected. We in wheelchairs, and maybe others, trying to assist us, would surely perish. Let us take an audit, please, of our current infrastructure as soon as possible. Thank you for your attention.
Great. Thanks, Ted. Thanks, Colin. And really appreciate you coming here today and bringing us up to speed with all your good work and working in conjunction with ourselves, which is good. Yeah, do we have any questions from the councillors? It's a very comprehensive presentation there.
Chairman,
Yes, Councillor Boddy.
You mentioned Sunset Village as one of your groups. What about the other retirement villages in Taupo? Is there any connection with them in your group as well?
Not currently. We would welcome it.
and part of age concern, a lot of the people in residential villages here may talk to us about issues that they have, and TMAG works really well for us because it gives us a focal point that we can discuss any issues that come up with us, with people living in the pensioner cottages or the retirement villages, and TMAG's a great place to funnel it all, so then it goes to TMAG and then it can go on to the council. And it's had some really good outcomes over the years.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jollins.
Just Colin and Ted, I just wanted to say thank you for coming today, because from my personal point of view, I mean, I understand we have obligations, but it's about understanding the awareness of some of the challenges and issues that face you guys and what they might be in terms of opportunities. So I guess from my point of view and for my fellow councillors, just thank you for your time, because I know it takes a lot of time and effort to get here, and you've obviously put a lot of work into what you've done, and this community is lucky to have you.
Oh, thank you. And further to that, actually, we could throw a challenge out to the councillors in that they spent a day in a wheelchair around town sometime or other with us.
Certainly, Councillor Body would be more than happy to do that, I'm sure.
It would be a very small wheelchair.
Okay, thank you.
To suit every size.
I'm getting a copy here of a Taupo District Council report that they purchased.
Yep.
An audit report that they purchased last year.
Okay, great. All right, thank you, Ted, and thank you, Colin. Nice to see you again. There's a suggested resolution there. Do I have a move for that?
Just before you put the resolution, Your Worship, we've just dealt with the annual plan. We're going to be dealing with the long-term plan. Can any of the officers say whether this audit is incorporated in any of those long-term plans? If not, I would suggest that we add something to this resolution, that perhaps we do address it in the long-term plan process.
I would second that if it's a formal motion.
So, to be thanked for their presentation, and council perhaps accommodate or in the long-term plan audit of what do we call it? Accessible external audit for the disability. Whatever. Come on, I want some words.
Look at the possibility. Obviously, we would have to just see what the cost is of that and all that.
Well, yeah, just
so what you're trying to
a report or something
In the minutes and just keep the resolution as it is.
Okay.
I'd like it in the resolution. It's okay being in the minutes, but I find that if we're not careful, we lose the thing. Okay. So I'd like something recorded in the resolution that we do actually have a report back
on
to
the cost
to council on the cost of
what an audit would cost.
Audit.
Yep.
Please.
So yep, there you go. Fine. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the words I wanted.
Yep, that's been moved by Councillor Hickling, supported by
that, Your Worship.
Councillor Roddy, that amended resolution. Are you okay with that, Ariana? Have you got all those?
Council considers an external audit as part of the long-term plan process.
And also thank Mr. Coburn,
Yeah, well,
Mr. Jones.
That's still there.
Yeah.
Yep.
So part of the resolution. Okay, thank you, Councillor Hickling. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Carried.